You're such an asshole.
All right, time for the super happy fun literature hour with Cappy. Uh, Keep me anonymous, please. This would be kind of like a Boomer Reviews, but Cappy narrates. How much for you to read and narrate the Cask of Amontillado on video and comment on it and the following questions? Did you ever take vengeance in a professional environment, or was it limited to you coming in as a consultant to subsequent banks and charging them what you were worth? If you came in someplace in a higher position, would you settle scores or just try to do your job as a fiduciary or walk away? I'm not looking to entomb someone, but I had an unstable guy stare at me like he wanted to kill me recently. I'm using a mild version of Pop's administrative violence. That's a good course to try to protect myself better. It feels pretty good, but I don't want to make a habit of it, and I hope I could avoid having to fight that way often. I'm figuring 30 to 45 minutes bare minimum, so I know it's not cheap. Thanks for all your content. You can find it here. So let me pull it up. I think it's the same one. Okay, so short story, public domain. The thousands of injuries of Fortunato. I had been born as I best could. But when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. So you so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitely settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is usually unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato, although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared. He prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity to practice imposture upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and gummery, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack, but in the matter of old wines he was sincere. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had a tight-fitting party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical caps and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" he said. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible. And in the middle of the carnival." "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain. Amontillado. I have my doubts. Amontillado, and I must satisfy them. Amontillado. As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchese. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me. Lucchese cannot tell Amontillado from sherry, and yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own. Come, let us go. Whither? To your vaults. My friend, no, I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. Lucchese, I have no engagement. Come. My friend, no, it is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nitre. Let us go nevertheless. The cold is merely nothing. Amontillado, you have been imposed upon. And as for Lucchesi, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado. Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm, putting on the mask of black silk and drawing a roquelaire closely about my person. I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of their time. I had told them that I should not return until the morning and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. I took from their sconces 2 flambeaux, and giving one to Fortunato, bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led into the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent, and stood together in the damp ground of the catacombs upon the Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. The pipe, he said. It is farther on, said I, but observe the white web work which gleams from these cavern walls. He turned toward me and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. Nitre, he asked at length. Nitre, I replied. How long have you had that cough? Ugh, 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 ugh. My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. It is nothing, he said at last. Come, I said with decision. We will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy as I once was. You are a man to be missed. For me, it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucchesi. Enough, he said. The cough is merely nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough. True, true, I replied, and indeed I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but you should use all proper caution. A draught of this medic will defend us from the damps. Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle, which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mold. Drink, I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly while his gels jingled. I drink, he said, to bury that repose around us, and I to your long life. He again took my arm, and we proceeded. These vaults, he said, are extensive. The Montresors, I replied, were great and a numerous family. I forget your arms. A huge human foot d'or in a field azure. The foot crushes a serpent rampant whose fangs are embedded in the heel. And the motto? Nemo me impune licet. Good, he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the medic. We had passed through walls of piled bones with casks and puncheons intermingling into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by an arm above the elbow. The nitre, I said, see it? It increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we'll go back ere it is too late. Your cough. It is nothing, he said. Let us go, but first another draught of the medic. I broke and reached him a flagon of de Grave. He emptied it at breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upward with gesticulation. I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. Do you not comprehend, he said. Not I replied. Then you are not of the Brotherhood. How? You are not of the Masons. Yes, yes, I said. Yes, yes. You, impossible. A Mason? A Mason, I replied. A sign, he said. It is this, I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my roquelaire. You jest, he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. But let us proceed to the Amontillado. Be it so, I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak, and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descended again, arrived at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeau rather to glow than flame. At the most remote end of the crypt there appeared another less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains piled to the vault overhead in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the fourth, the bones had been drawn down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall, thus exposed by displacing the bones, we perceived the still interior recess, in depth at 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no especial use within itself, but formed merely the interval between two of the colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of their circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depths of the recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. Proceed, I said. Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucchese, he is an ignoramus, interrupted my friend as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. At a moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing the links around his wrist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. Pass your hand, I said, over the wall. You cannot help feeling the nitrate. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return. No? Then I must positively leave you. But I must first render you all the little attentions of my power. The Amontillado, ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. True, I replied, the Amontillado. As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones of which I had spoken before. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of the masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low moaning cry from the depths of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth, and then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which that I might hearken to it with the more satisfaction. I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel and finished without interruption. The fifth, the sixth, the seventh tier, the wall was now nearly upon a level with my breast. Again paused, and holding the flambeau over the mason work, I threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams, bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form, seemed thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated, trembled, unsheathing my rapier. I began to grope it about the recess, but the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hands upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamor grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, 9th, and 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last, and the 11th there remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position, but now there came from out of the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice which I had a difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, "Ha, ha, ha, he, he. A very good joke indeed, an excellent jest. We will have many rich laugh about it at the palazzo. He. Over our wine. He. The Amontillado, I said. He. Yes, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will not they be waiting us at the palazzo? The Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone. Yes, I said, let us be gone. For the love of God, Montresor. Yes, I said, for the love of God. But to those words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, Fortunato. No answer. Called again. No answer. I called again. Fortunato. No answer still. I thrust the torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. Then came forth in reply only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For the half a century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace requiescat, I guess means rest in peace. All right, so the guy insulted the dude, and he buried him in the catacombs while the guy was drunk. So let's go back to your original request here. Comment on it. All right, so let's comment on it. It's just a nice little story of revenge. I was more annoyed by the Old English, even though Edgar Allan Poe was not English, it was American English. But it shows you how much the English changes. A language can change in 150 years. Did you ever take vengeance in a professional environment, or was it limited to you coming in as a consultant to subsequent banks and charging them what you were worth? You came into so let's talk about in the capacity of me getting revenge on bankers in the banking industry. Revenge in general depends on what you can what's the word I'm looking exercise in terms of revenge. When I was first in banking, I didn't have any money. I was not paid that much. I didn't have expensive tastes either. But it wasn't until I had multiple sources of income could I get some form of revenge. If you only have one employer and you are poor, you're at their mercy. This is why one of the first things I say to do is get a 6-month emergency reserve fund so that if your bosses lie to you about the job prospects of a new job or just are mentally insane, which they were, some of them, not all of them, of course, you can leave. I unfortunately did not put myself in that position. I was stupid and kept paying off my mortgage early. So I had no emergency fund, which I should have done. I thought it was also bad luck. So the amount of meat, that was the word, the amount of revenge I could mete out depended on my position. And so if you wish to be able to mete out revenge, you have to not be dependent upon these people in any way, shape, or form. As this particular case, it pertains to your employer. So the forms of vengeance, there really wasn't any. I just had to suffer it. If there was a form of revenge, quitting or firing your boss, because that's what happens when an employee quits, is you are firing your boss. That is a form of revenge. It strikes at their ego, which thankfully in banking and finance, ego is run rife. So you quitting a job will normally piss off your average rank and file, normie conforming boss. But if you're in an arrogant industry, Hollywood, media, banking, you'll piss them off. So that's a little bit of revenge. Where I got other revenge, it wasn't necessarily intended as revenge. It was more intended like, this is illegal crap and you guys need to stop. Is why I would report. I think like 3 different cases I reported either my boss or the bank or some bankers or some borrowers to the feds. The problem with that is you now have outsourced your revenge to whether the authorities are going to do anything about it, which they didn't until it was later. So there was that. And then down the road where I no longer needed employers because either I had eliminated all my debts, had very low costs, I was living off of dance class income or security or my online classes. There wasn't like, I got to go and get them revenge. I frankly just didn't have time for it. I wrote a book behind the housing crash. I wish desperately to name these people, not to defame them, but to describe them so that they would never work again. But the industry is so corrupt, they'd find another job. It wasn't that. So there's also an element of like, can you even get revenge on these people? So when I would consult and work as a contractor, I talked about how, what was it? Like, you're going to pay me $65 an hour, 75, they said 65. There is an element of getting revenge by proxy on the banking industry. Like, you're going to pay me an egregious sum. And they agreed to it. So there's a little bit of revenge there. But nothing like death. Nothing that would change their opinion. Nothing that would make them realize they were wrong. Because I just wasn't in the position to do that without having to metaphorically slice my own throat or cause my own self-harm. And then if you came in someplace a higher position, would you sell scores or just try to do your job as a fiduciary or walk away? if I came, I mean, yeah, I was a vice president at one time, but they give away those titles with reckless abandon. I didn't really lord over anyone. Would I settle scores like within, like if I went to a bank and I had previous bosses or employees I knew were scum, I'd fire them all. In part revenge, but more like, no, you're incompetent. You're going to get this company in trouble. You're going to have the feds come down on us. Thankfully, though, most of these people ended up getting fired anyway, could never work in banking again, or certainly probably shouldn't. I don't think anyone would hire them again. So if I ran into any of these bankers and I was in a position of power, absolutely. I'm like, you get out of here. You're scum. You're criminal. You're also incompetent and stupid. And so I would, but that would be just to get them. I'm not going to work with them. I'm not going to have them ruin the company. I know the caliber and character. Do my job as a fiduciary. That would be my job as a fiduciary, as a responsibility to the owners of the bank or any kind of company. I would get rid of the bad people. Or walk away? No, because if I was in a position of power, I could change my environment to remove the people that would be incompetent and make it bad. So I wouldn't. You walk away when you don't control the situation, when the environment is going to be bad, no matter how much you work at it. That's when you walk away. So there's that. But let me talk about revenge in one way, and it was disproportionately the aftermath of the housing crisis that taught me about revenge. If you are moral, if you are honest, if you're truthful with yourself, that means you live in reality. All right. And that means the people who violate you, transgress upon you, do you wrong are immoral, unethical, evil, or simply not obeying or abiding by reality. Now, that's fine. You might be able to get away with it for a little bit, but usually you don't. Inevitably, it catches up to you because you're running a scam. You're like Bernie Madoff, all right, or that ugly, doping Democrat-looking kid who ran the crypto exchange or whatever. Inevitably, you got to be smarter than reality to run the scam and get away with it. Most people aren't. And so inevitably reality catches up with you and people come after you, go after your head, or they put you in jail or something like that. But also, if it is the final and ultimate and concluding statement of your type of caliber, of your type of character, you are a bad person. You are a person of poor character. So if you are your standard American bacon scumbag and you're trying to fraudulently get loans passed so you can get your commission, you are also almost guaranteed to be equally bad, poor, evil, unethical, and all other factors and decisions in your life. You will try to borrow more money than you could afford to impress people with a car that you can't afford. You will probably try to cheat friends. You might, I'm trying to think, no honor among thieves. Like if you're hanging out, a perfect example. If you're hanging out with a group of people and you have a little bit of success because you worked hard at it, and they say, what, you think you're better than us? That person is a scumbag. That person is evil. They're lazy. And you can almost be guaranteed that person is trying to screw somebody over in a pot deal, avoid honoring his end of any bargain. They have no friends. And so usually these people are such poor people, it affects all other aspects of their life, which means all other aspects of their life are miserable, are pain, or torture. And so they have an unhealthy marriage or a miserable marriage. They're on the verge of divorce. They're financially strapped. They're financially stressed. They're unhealthy. They're fat. I mean, God, I think there was one banker I worked with that was in okay shape. Oh, God, you want to talk about divorce? I think like 80-90% of the bankers I worked with were divorced. They're always trying to bro it up. Like they made handsome salaries, but they spent more than their handsome salaries. In other words, I only saw or experienced bankers' lives in the capacity of them being a banker and being fraudulent, not embezzling, but fraudulent generally, stealing, scheming scumbags. But the rest of their lives were miserable as well. I remember one guy, I think it was on his third wife. This fat, dumb F. And, didn't save any money for retirement. It was just hilarious. Just hilarious watching these truly, by the word, inferior people living inferior lives. And when I realized, especially when the feds started coming in, people got fired. These people, their wives left them. They ended up filing for bankruptcy because they're in no better financial shape than the people they lent to. When that came down and you saw the pain and agony, it was not right after, but shortly after I had gone through this experience of a lot of pain. And I realized that if my mind was focused on other things, it was like a computer processor that could only process one program at a time. And if you were busy working out or running or doing something else, your mind could not focus on other stuff. And the pain for that moment in time would go away. And then maybe you realize, well, then what is life but, and TFM, Turfling Monkey picks on this, but a series of events, a series of sentient experiences and how you feel. And it's somewhat hypocritical and cowardly, where it's like, okay, well, then if I just ignore my problems, they don't go away, but you don't experience them at that moment in time. Especially if things are outside of your control, then you should not dwell on them. And so what I realized is that in order to truly suffer, you have to have the time to suffer. And this made me realize one of the most important things about revenge and ultimately leading up to karma is why you never kill your enemies. You never kill them. If you kill them, like Fortunato, whoever Fortunato's adversary was, they cease to exist. And in ceasing to exist, they no longer could suffer pain. And very few humans have the intellectual brain power or horsepower to say, okay, this bad thing has happened to me. I need to set that aside and go and continue on with my life. They will rue, they will suffer, they will mire. And so you have to keep them alive. And what I realized, as much as it originally, I wanted to go in and just beat the ever-living crap out of these vile, evil human beings. There was nothing more I could do to cause them more pain and misery than what life was already going to do to them through their own virtues and acts. I mean, okay, could I take a baseball bat to the kneecaps and put them in a wheelchair? Sure, you can ruin it, but now you got to face jail time, right? But I can guarantee you right now, a lot of these guys, some of them are dead because they were older. There's not a single one of these guys alive today that are happy. There's not a single one of these guys alive. This is like, what, 10, 15 years ago, the housing crisis was, who aren't miserable. Now, if I went in there and ended them as Fortunato had his life ended, they would have avoided these 15 years of misery. I keep track of several of them. I know one guy for a fact. He's in nonprofits. He's just beg. He's on the Lord will provide. And if you've ever been on that retirement plan, you know the Lord won't provide jack. He's just poor. It's great. It's wonderful watching this guy. What could I have done more to pain them than they themselves trying to cheat at a game where they're playing against all of the world and they're not going to tolerate it? Where they got to, just always trying to shortcut, always trying to shortchange people. And so, and banking almost selects for that. What are bankers? Bankers are weak, pathetic men who want engineer salaries without engineer work. That's it. That's what bankers are. And it rarely works out for them, rarely. And if they do work, I mean, even the ones who are successful, could you imagine what it's like working in investment banking and Wall Street? Working with those like little pretentious, pencil dick cocksuckers? Are you kidding me? You gotta live in New York. And so my approach to revenge is one of karma, not out of laziness, but now that I finally understand, like your parents say, oh, don't worry, they'll get theirs in the end. And like, yeah, you're just saying that because you're a lazy parent, won't take me out of the school. Like, and you won't let me fight. Because if I fight, then I get in trouble. You won't back me up because I started it. And I'm going to have to take a weapon to school, like to even the odds, because everyone's bigger and stronger than me. Why'd you do? Oh, that's unfair. You should just go up against the kid who's like 6'2" already. You're 5'2". That's only a foot he's got on you. But in the end, these people have behavior that will not be tolerated by the rest of society. And they will waste their time in that behavior, in that profession, or whatever else have you. They will be punished by society, and they will have nothing of value, no meaningful, good, healthy interactions or relationships with people. A lot of times they'll end up in jail. And so all you got to do is let them suffer. Yeah, it could get you a third marriage. If I bumped you off because you aggrieved me in the past, you would suffer the third marriage and your third divorce. Could you think about? Could you cause more pain? Let's say you just you get in a fight, you win, you beat the ever living crap of a guy, and you feel good. All right, is that anywhere near the pain? A 7-year marriage to a gal who immediately starts getting fat and divorces you in the end and takes heavy. Is that anywhere near the pain you could cause than what the family courts and the divorce courts and a woman with a vengeance could do to you? You don't even come close. And so this is where kind of the enjoy the decline comes in, where I just sip and enjoy it. Like, yeah. I might even look up some of these bankers back then. I might look them up just to revel in their misery, because they're not happy. None of them are happy. They're all miserable. And so this is the key thing, if you are honest, if you are virtuous, if you are true, and someone violates you, that means they're unvirtuous. They're not true. They're liars. They're evil. They're scum. And you don't have to lift a finger. Maybe you can accelerate it. Report them to the feds. All right. But it depends on your specific situation. So here we are at your specific. So that's my philosophy on revenge. I'm not looking to entomb someone, but I had an unstable guy stare at me like he wanted to kill me recently. I'm using a mild version of Pop's administrative violence to protect myself better. Well, if you're in threat of death, yeah, you got to be careful of that. It feels pretty good, but I don't want to make a habit of it. I hope I can avoid having to fight that way often. Well, I mean, you could make his life hell. But I mean, there's ways to do it if you're using Pop's administrative violence. There is no paper trail. He can't track you, so that's good. But why don't you step back and look at his current life? All right. If he wants to kill you because you held to a rule, held to a law, you did something principled, you got in his way, his little scheming, his little crime, whether it's illegal or not, he's trying to commit a crime. What's his life like? Is he poor? Is he a pothead? He doesn't sound, I mean, it sounds like you're working at a cell phone store again. Is he hoping to get respect, making his $13 an hour? Is this guy got a stable financial life or no? Does he live at home? Here's another perfect example. Is this somebody who's been convinced and hoodwinked by the Democrat Party to believe their traits, whether that's their race, their skin color, their ethnicity, their gender, their choice of gender, their mental illness, their disease, that's the most amazing thing? Like there's no limit to the number of people on Twitter. There was a guy with pronouns and he happened to be black, and he was so pissed off at white people. And all I said, you sound like Charlie Brown's teacher, except instead of the trombone, it's white, 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 white. Oh, and he got all mad. What do I have to do to make that guy? Is that his life, just hating someone else of a different color? So if that's this kind of low grade life this guy is in, what are you going to do to could you make his life any worse? Maybe a little bit. Maybe. Is it worth your time? Is it worth the chance of getting now? He's got red. Now you got an enemy. Well, just let him be. And once you get to this level, it's actually kind of nice. It did help with anger management. Now, when I get some slow dumbass in front of me on the roads, yeah, usually you want to run them off the road and murder them. But now if anything, I try to catch up. You just could see it in their eyes. I mean, maybe it's the person too. Maybe it's just some old person. I talked about a previous video, like the old boomer who has one of those brand new Corvettes, the mid-engine Corvettes, really expensive Corvette, and I'm beating him with a 4-banger engine. He's not driving it. I'm like, man, that's so sad. You got that vehicle and you're not using it. Or people stop in the middle of the road, which is infuriating. But okay, there's that woman, typical middle-aged, Karen. I'm going to stop because I'm the only person in the world with her SUV. What's that like? She can't find a place to park. So if she's that dumb, what is like every normal daily task like? Is it that much of a challenge for her to go to get stamps at the post office? Yes, it is. Do you think she has some husband that's going to support her when she's that stupid? No, she doesn't. Do you know how hard it must be for her to work and do basic finance? It must be absolutely incredible. What could you possibly do getting angry at that person on the road? And all you got to do is drive up, look at him like, oh, yeah, that is a stupid person. That is a dumb person. You could see it in their eyes. And I don't know what it's like to be that, but it's got to be miserable. And then you're not angry. You don't feel bad for them. But I personally, I take joy in like, wow, that person now, really? Someone's calling me. Who is this? California. I don't know anyone from California. You take joy in their misery. Absolutely take joy in their misery. Because they're dumb. Oh yeah, go back a couple videos ago about how stupid people stand in lines. Like 2 lanes, cars going out to the road for In-N-Out Burger. Wow. Man, does your life suck? You must be like, should I have stupid people backing up the line into a major throughway in Vegas? No, I should not. Am I aggrieved because of people's stupidity? Am I transgressed upon? Technically, yes. What am I going to do to hurt those people more than what they've already done through their own choices and stupidity to get to the point they think the best use of their hour of the day is to sit in line to get some unhealthy fast food? What can you possibly do? And so I just, just let it be. Go think about what his life is like, or her life. I don't know. I guess it's not a guy or gal. And then ask yourself, is there anything you could possibly do to make their lives worse? If anything, you can do, and I'll kind of leave it on this. Another brilliant guy. I told this story before. One of the best bits of revenge, maybe not even revenge, but to teach me a lesson a guy did to me. I was at my bar in the WBL, and here's this old dude, not too old, but older than me, and he's overweight. I'm looking at this guy. I'm like, what? And he's with this drop dead gorgeous girl. And here I am. I was pretty good. I was probably approaching the peak of my game. And I'm looking, and I was hammered. And I'm like, how the F does that guy get that girl? So I went up to her. I was like, I'm like, what are you doing with that old guy? Like, what is wrong with you? And she's like, well, he just treats me right. And I wasn't paying attention. And some people in the bar who were all friends, they're all proud of me because, like, you don't know who that was. Well, anyway, I'm like, all right, fine, whatever. Maybe I was a little bit rude. So I'm sitting there at the bar, and I'm like, I love to see this old timer do something. And he's like, hey, buddy, what are you drinking? I'm like, Rumplemans. He's like, get him a double Rumplemans. So he gave me a double Rumplemans. One of the worst hangovers I've ever had in my life. The dude didn't have to do anything. He could have beat the crap out of me. I would have felt better. All he did was push me to continue what I was doing. And I remember that, like, this guy, without wasting a calorie of energy, maybe he had to like spend a fraction of a calorie of energy to reach into his wallet and buy my drink. He got me so much pain by having me continue doing what I was doing. Now I find out later the reason is because she was a whore. She was a prostitute. And they all knew it. She did the regulars in the area, and he was just this rich guy who lived on the lake. And they're like, dude, we've been seeing that girl coming in and out. You nailed her, man. I'm like, wait, oh, that's why she was with the guy. I thought she just like didn't want to go out with people roughly her own age. And is there something you could do to make them make bad mistakes? One I like to do now is if I see young people mouthing off on the internet, mouthing off like the guy at the checkout lane. You're like, well, yeah, Trump getting elected is pretty bad, huh? Like, what are you studying? Theater? Hey, you better get at least a master's or a doctorate in that. College degrees on. You push them, man. I'm going to major in sociology. You better get a master's. Oh, journalism? You better get a master's. I don't know if you're going to take you. I can't take you seriously. You only got a bachelor's degree? I think you need to get a master's degree. Oh yeah, you men, you don't need men. Dude, patriarchy. You prove that you don't. You show them. You get overweight. You cut your hair. You do whatever you want. You go, girl. You do it. That's how you get revenge. You keep if they're well, it was I think it's one of Zinzu. Your enemy keeps making a mistake. Don't interrupt them. It's kind of like that. So see if you can help them out a little bit. You know, you're at the club. Well, this one they might be able to sue you. He's hammered. He's going to drive home. Maybe get him another drink. Well, see, now you're putting other people at risk. Nah, you can't do that. That'd be bad. Yeah, you can't do that. See what I'm saying? So I'm kind of a hands-off kind of revenge guy because these people are such pathetic, despicable, inferior people. And they need to stay alive to suffer. I let them suffer. I let them. So there you go. Any super chats? Scroll down. That it? All right. We'll see you guys later. Toodles.